My parents said they couldn't afford to take me on family vacation, and a week later my mom posted on Facebook, "Our family and our dear daughter with her new boyfriend. The family is together." I did not react to it. A week later, when they had an emergency, they came to beg for help. I cut them off, and then my dad. I'm Jack. I'm 26, and I rent a one-bedroom apartment just outside of Denver. I work in IT support for a healthcare software company, mostly remotely. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and gives me space from my family, with whom I thought I'd finally made peace. Turns out I was just ignoring the obvious. This whole thing started less than a month ago. Mid-March, I was at my parents' house for dinner, something I do every couple of weeks, more out of habit than anything else. My sister Patricia was there. She's 25 and still lives at home, spoiled in a way that's subtle, unless you've lived next door to her for 2 decades. She doesn't get everything she wants, just everything that matters. We were sitting at the table when my mom started talking about this trip they were planning. Some cabin resort in Aspen, Rio, rustic meets luxury kind of place. She had printed out the brochure and everything. They were going to hike, unplug, maybe ride horses, the works. I casually asked if I could go. I hadn't had a vacation in years. I thought it might be good for all of us to spend some time together just once. Mom gave me this look like she felt sorry for me. Then she started to explain that things were tight this year. The cabin only sleeps 4, and money was kind of tight after taxes, and she didn't want me to feel pressured to pay my own way because she knew rent was expensive and all that. I didn't push. I just said, "Okay, sure, no worries." I left her apartment that night not even angry, just kind of numb. I kept thinking, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it was really about the money. Maybe they really thought they were sparing me the burden. A week later, I'm working late in my apartment. Around 9:30, I took a break and checked Facebook. My mother had posted a photo. She, my dad, Patricia, and Patricia's boyfriend, standing on a cliff in Colorado, arms around each other, smiling like a Hallmark ad. The caption read, "Our family and our dear daughter with her new boyfriend. Family together." I don't know what hit me harder, the fact that they went without me, or the fact that they brought Zach and called it our family. Zach, a guy Patricia had been seeing for 2 months. He was new, quiet, the kind of person who says things like, "Nice to meet you," and actually means it. I liked him. I still kind of do, which makes the whole thing worse because if they'd asked me if it was okay for them to bring him, I probably would have said yes. But they didn't ask. They just replaced me. I didn't say anything. Not to them, not to Zach, not to the post. I just sat with it and let it eat a hole in me. A week after they returned, it was Monday night. I'd just finished dinner and was watching something on Netflix when there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and saw all 3 of them, Mom, Dad, Patricia, standing in the hallway. They looked wrecked, hair tousled, eyes sunken like they hadn't slept in days. I didn't even say hello. I just waited. Mom started right in, something about how things had gone downhill fast. Their SUV had been stolen and dumped in some parking lot with the engine removed. Dad had invested money, borrowed from his own retirement, I later found out, in a business deal with an old friend that turned out to be a scam. And Patricia, she had tried to help by putting some expenses on her credit card. Now she was maxed out, and in a panic. They needed help just for a little while. A place to crash. Maybe a small loan. Just until things stabilized. I told them no. Flat, no. Not because I didn't have the space, not because I couldn't help, but because they'd already shown me exactly where I stood. They stared at me as if I'd just thrown them out into the snow. Then they left without another word. I didn't hear from them for a few days. Then things started to spiral in a direction I didn't see coming. 2 days after I threw them out, there was silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. It felt strange at first. My mom, the queen of check-ins and guilt-ridden group messages, suddenly disappeared. Patricia wasn't even posting on social media. That alone was odd. Her usual stories of brunches, dog selfies, or blurry sunsets had gone dark. I'll admit, for a minute, I thought maybe they were just embarrassed. Maybe this would be the wake-up call. Maybe we'd all cool off and talk like adults. But I underestimated them. Once again, Friday morning, I got a text from Zach. It was short. He just said, "Can we talk?" I said, "Sure." He came over that evening. He looked tired, like he was carrying some weight he wasn't used to. He sat down and didn't even touch the drink I offered him. Then he hit me with it. He told me he didn't know they hadn't invited me on the trip. He assumed I was just busy with work or couldn't make it. He said he felt sick when he saw my face after reading the Facebook post. He didn't want to go on the trip originally, but Patricia insisted. Then he said he wanted out. Not just out of the conversation, out of the relationship. He'd been living with them for a week. After I said no, they dragged him into their mess. They made him use his savings for food, told him it was only temporary. My mother cornered him the night before and asked what his long-term intentions were with Patricia. Then she suggested marriage, kids. She even pulled out a photo album from when Patricia was a baby as if that would sweeten the deal. He was horrified. Told me he hadn't even been with her long enough to meet her extended family, let alone plan for kids. He said he felt like he joined a cult, so he broke up with Patricia, packed up, and left that morning. That's when things started to change. Sunday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, it was my dad. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly since they showed up at my door. The message was cold. No apology, no explanation, just, "You've made your choice. We'll do things without you." I didn't think much of it at first until Monday. I walked out to my car to go to the store, keys in hand, and I froze when I saw the windshield. Smeared across the glass in what looked like oil or paint were the words, "Family doesn't leave family." No note, no witnesses. I filed the report. The cops said they checked the cameras in the area, but I already knew no one would be caught. That same day, my bank account was flagged for suspicious activity. Someone had tried to access it from my dad's town. Probably a coincidence, I thought. Maybe. I didn't call them. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I started planning. If they wanted a war, I could give them one, but on my terms, and they wouldn't see it coming. After the windshield, I stopped pretending this was something that would blow over. I didn't call the police anymore. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I went silent and started digging. I knew my father had lines he didn't want crossed, people he owed money to, some things he'd rather not have on paper, and it didn't take long to find one of them. Back in 2022, he'd used my social security number as a co-signer on a loan. I only found out because of a random soft credit pull I did last year. I confronted him at the time and he played dumb until I threatened to get a lawyer. He begged me to let it go, said he'd pay it off and close it. I never saw any proof, but I did nothing. Now I saw an opportunity. I called the loan company and told them the truth. I said I never signed anything. I sent them an affidavit and a letter from a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. The account was now under investigation. His balance had gone up, his interest had been frozen, and he'd been banned from anything credit-related until this was resolved. 3 days later, my mother texted me a photo of a letter she had received from the bank. Then she called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. She was crying, asking me why I was doing this. She said we were family and family forgives. I didn't answer. That night, Patricia posted a story on Instagram, a black screen with white text. "Betrayal is always loudest when it comes from those you trust." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was desperate. The next day I went to see someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. My grandfather, my father's father. He lives in a little town about 40 minutes away. I always liked him. He was nothing like my dad. Quiet, sharp, always had this dry way of saying things that made people nervous. He was the kind of guy who didn't talk much, But when he did, people listened. When I showed up at his house, he opened the door, gave me a long look, and said, "Took you long enough." We sat on the porch. I told him everything. Not just what they had done to me, what they'd done for years. How it always came down to them and Patricia. How I was only useful when things fell apart. He didn't say much. He just sat there and listened. When I told him about the windshield, about the loan, about how they came to me with fake apologies after lying to my face, he leaned back and let out this dry little laugh. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You know, people like your father didn't live long in 45. Big mouths, no honor. The kind of guy who'd sell you out to save his coat." I didn't even know how to respond. Then he added, "Let them come crawling, but don't let them forget the mud on their knees." He offered to help in his own way. He said he still had some friends who could push some buttons if needed. I told him not yet, but I didn't say no. The next morning, I got another message from my mother. This time, it was different. She said they wanted to meet, just to talk, clear the air. She said it would be just the three of them. Me, her, and Dad. They didn't know that I already had something else planned for that day. And they definitely didn't know that I'd invited someone else to join us. We agreed to meet at this quiet diner on the edge of town. Neutral territory, not too public, but not a place where they could corner me either. I chose the booth in the back. I was already seated when they walked in. Mom, Dad, and Patricia. No Zach this time. He was out of the picture, just the original trio. They sat down as if it were a family dinner. Mom tried to smile. Dad looked irritated before he said a word. Patricia wore sunglasses inside, probably for effect. They didn't order anything. They just dove right in. Mom started talking about family, about forgiveness, about misunderstandings, and bad timing. Dad stayed quiet, which was not like him. He usually liked to play the victim. Today, he looked like someone with something to lose. This was new. They offered to forget everything if I just stopped escalating. They said things were hard enough without me adding fuel. I told them I wasn't adding anything. I was just tired of pretending. Then I told them something else. Something I'd been waiting to drop. I said, "By the way, do you remember that small business loan you applied for with that veterans grant? The one where you doubled your income and listed your employment as active military?" His face froze. I leaned forward. "I sent them the real numbers and a copy of your DD 214. Mom's mouth opened as if to say something, but nothing came out. I wasn't lying. My grandfather had given me the papers. He said he'd kept it, in case my dad ever tried to pull something stupid with the VA again. He had, and now it was being investigated for fraud. I got up, ready to leave. That's when my grandfather walked in. He wasn't invited to sit down. He was just standing at the end of the table with his arms crossed. My father looked like he'd seen a ghost. Grandpa didn't say anything right away. He just looked at his son the way you look at something disappointing that you can't give back. Then he said, loud enough for the other tables to hear, "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. You never figured out that being smart doesn't mean being honest." He turned to me, smiled just a little, and added, "I'm glad you didn't turn out like him." Then he left. I left after that. The fallout began almost immediately. 3 days later, Dad's loan application was officially frozen, pending investigation. His business partner backed out of a deal, probably hearing whispers from someone who knew someone. My mother posted a long, rambling Facebook status about how families should forgive each other, not destroy each other. Patricia posted a photo of herself crying, followed by a quote about how people show their true colors in hard times. I didn't comment. I didn't return the 24 phone calls that followed. Instead, I took another step. There was a family trust. My grandfather had set it up long ago, something small but stable, something to pass on to his grandchildren someday. My dad had been quietly trying to convince him to move it all over to Patricia. I said, "I'm not interested in family wealth." I sat down with Grandpa again that week. I didn't even have to bring it up. He told me he'd already changed the paperwork. Patricia was out. My dad's name was completely gone. He laughed when he told me, "Your dad was always good at playing the hero until someone read the script." The next message I got from my parents wasn't a voicemail. It was a legal notice. Apparently, they were considering suing me. That's when I decided it was time to stop playing defense. The legal notice wasn't serious, not really. It was a candid letter written by some local lawyer they probably found online. But it said enough that my parents were willing to cross the line, that they thought they could scare me into backing down. What they didn't realize was that I had already been preparing for this, quietly, methodically. I had two goals: to burn their lies to the ground and to make sure they never had the strength to crawl back out. The first step was public. I created a folder, screenshots, documents, data, texts, all the times they used me, lied to me, took from me, proof of the loan in my name, the text from Patricia guilting me into helping with her debt, the VA fraud paperwork Grandpa had kept, photos of the smashed windshield, and the message my dad left after I told them no. Everything. Then I published it. Not in a dramatic tell-all. Just a post titled, "This is what family looks like when you're only useful in a crisis." I posted it on a community forum that we all belong to. Local, tight-knit, mostly suburban folks who love to gossip. The kind of place where my dad had always tried to play the respected family man. Within hours it spread, people commented. Some shared their own stories. A few recognized my dad's name and weren't surprised. By morning, two things had happened. First, my mom deleted her Facebook. Every post gone. Second, my dad lost his volunteer position with the local business council. Someone had forwarded my post. I wasn't done. I contacted the collection agency associated with Patricia's credit card debt. I told them where she worked now. I also sent them a list of purchases she made on Zach's card, which he gave me after they broke up. Designer bags, concert tickets, a spa retreat, the same week they claimed they were barely surviving. He was more than happy to cooperate. They froze her account by the end of the week. She called me 6 times in one night. I didn't pick up. But the real blow came later. My dad was trying to start a new business, something about property management. It wasn't up yet, but I found the LLC application online. My mom was listed as the second manager, so I called a friend who works in real estate law. The company hadn't completed its zoning permits. And guess what? There were discrepancies in the paperwork. Wrong addresses, misreported income, enough to trigger a delay and a review. Within 3 days, the city froze the application and began a formal investigation. I didn't tell them it was me, but they knew. This time, they sent me an email. No threats, no legalese, just 2 words. "Why, Jack?" I didn't reply. Instead, I printed out the Candace letter they had sent me, took it to Grandpa, and handed it to him. He read it, then poured 2 glasses of bourbon, one for him, one for me. He raised his glass and said, "Your father was always good at writing checks with his mouth. Too bad he never learned how to cash them." Then he added, "They've done enough damage for now, but if they come back, we'll give them a proper burial." I nodded. We drank. And then I began to work on the last step, because the house they live in, it's not really theirs. It was Grandpa's, and they're about to learn what it feels like to pack up in a hurry. 2 weeks after the city froze my dad's business account, the whole thing started to fall apart faster than even I expected. Turns out when you build your life on borrowed money, forged papers, and fake charm, all it takes is one solid push. That push was me. The city flagged his tax returns. Then an audit was opened, and someone, probably that retired accountant Grandpa knew, anonymously tipped off the local paper. They ran a small article about mismanaged funds and questionable veterans' business claims. It didn't name him, but everyone in our town who read it knew exactly who it was. One by one, his investors pulled out, not because they cared about ethics, just because they smelled fire and didn't want to get burned. Then came the real blow. My dad had taken out a second mortgage on the house he and my mom lived in. Only, the house wasn't legally his. It was still in Grandpa's name, something he conveniently forgot when he tried to use forged documents to support the loan. The bank called. Grandpa answered. And instead of covering for him, he handed over the real deed. That's when Grandpa made his final move. He changed the trust officially, legally. The house and the land it sat on went into a family trust with one name on it, mine. Not Patricia's, not my mother's, not even a clause for my father. They were given 30 days to leave. They didn't fight it, not publicly. But the last week before the move, something strange happened. I got a message from a woman I didn't recognize. She said she was my dad's former assistant, from when he ran a chain of car dealerships, his one semi-successful gig years ago. She said she had seen it all unfold and thought I should know something. Turns out my dad had another kid, not recently, years ago, a half-brother, from an affair he had while my mom was pregnant with Patricia. I didn't know what to do with that information. I still don't. But somehow it made more sense. The way he treated Patricia like royalty, the way he treated me like I was barely there, like I was the reminder that he didn't run fast enough. I didn't tell Patricia. I don't think I ever will. The last day before the eviction, my parents didn't say a word. They were packing boxes. Patricia cried and wrote cryptic quotes about being cut off by her own blood. My mom looked like someone who had aged 10 years in a week. My dad, he just looked tired. He left a note in Grandpa's mailbox before they left. I never saw it. Grandpa burned it in the fire pit without reading it. When I asked him what it said, he said, "I don't care." I've been reading his excuses for 30 years now. They live in a rented house on the outskirts of town. I've heard from someone that my dad is trying to get some consulting work for a friend who doesn't know any better. Patricia is working retail again. Mom has been quiet, too quiet. I visit Grandpa once a week. We sit on the porch and have coffee. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we just listen to the silence. One time he took out an old hunting knife and gave it to me. I thought it was a sentimental gesture. Instead, he said, "This was my father's. He used it to cut ropes when the barn caught fire in '42. Sometimes you gotta cut things loose before they pull you under." Then he smiled. That crooked old man's smile. "You did good, Jack. You didn't just get up. You finished it." And he was right. My dad still emails me once a month now. Always a new address, always the same tone, remorse painted over bitterness. I never answer. I don't need revenge anymore. I have already won. Update 1. It had been a few months since the eviction. My life had actually started to feel settled. I was seeing someone new, working on a promotion, even considering getting a dog. I hadn't heard from my parents in weeks, which was unusual considering my dad's streak of monthly guilt emails. Then one came out of nowhere, but it wasn't from him. It was from a lawyer, and not one of those sketchy Candace types. This was a real estate lawyer from out of state. The subject line of the email simply said, "Urgent, regarding purchase of property by Mr. Ronald K." My dad's full name. I opened it thinking it might be junk. It wasn't. Apparently, my dad had bought a small piece of land outside of town, not in his name. He'd used a shell LLC with someone else listed as manager, someone he'd worked with decades ago. It was remote, just trees and dirt, no utilities, no permits. But here's the kicker. He had submitted blueprints for a self-sustaining cabin, off-grid living, hidden in paperwork, no address published. The lawyer didn't know who I was at first. He said he'd been hired to handle the permits and found my name by accident while cross-referencing my grandfather's deed of trust. Something about land disputes and overlapping zoning. The properties were close to each other. My dad wanted to live out there alone, off the grid, completely isolated. I didn't know what to think. It wasn't like him. He thrived on people watching, applause, control. But this looked like the exit plan of a man who knew he was out of cards. I didn't tell Grandpa at first. I thought it might be better if he didn't know. But then last week, Grandpa called me over. He had that look again, like something was already playing in his head. "Got a call," he said. "An old friend said your dad's been snooping around the city assessor's office, asking about moving boundaries, building permits, trying to quietly redraw maps." I nodded and told him what I had found out. He didn't say anything for a while, just nodded back. Then he said, "You know why he's doing it, right?" I shrugged. "He's not trying to disappear. He's trying to wait us out." That hadn't even occurred to me, but it made sense. My dad wasn't running. He was hiding, laying low, waiting for people to cool off, then coming back when the smoke cleared, pretending to be humble. Grandpa pulled out a small envelope and handed it to me. Inside was a deed, not to our property, but to the land next to the one my father had just bought. Grandpa had bought it a week before through someone else. He looked at me and grinned. "If he wants to disappear into the woods, he'll have to look at my house every morning." I didn't even ask how he did it, but a part of me knew this wasn't over. My dad wasn't planning on disappearing. He was planning a comeback, and this time it wouldn't be public. It would be slow, quiet, manipulative, just like him. But now we were watching, and he had no idea.